Government Muhammad Rayhanul FK. Video.
So, as I will start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Everyone in today's world where everyone is getting bombarded while us here sitting alone, although we can still have our prosperity, although we can still eat our food, that fancy hadin food, but in other case of the scenario, people out there in Gaza are having some unlikely scenario that even their prosperity, a single bits of their human rights are not even available. Imagine in a world where even a family where the dads have to go so much to even have a bulletproof vest to just go find food, a piece of bread for so the children can still not starve, or even the mother to still attain and take care for their child. In this likely scenario, there's no doubt your own morality as a human, as a nation, you will want to help these people. And we will also need to indulge in a way that this is a correlation in international relation treaty. So in this house, we will support a Prabowo plan to evacuate civilians from Gaza in a part where this evacuation plan will likely want to evacuate 100 civilians to Gaza in Indonesia in a temporary humanitarian land. So regarding what is a humanitarian plan is a formal support in which in which this case is a form of an evacuation that is temporary, that gives rehabilitative measure to these vulnerable civilians. And in this case, war victims of Gaza. Those vulnerable civilians include women, children, wounded civilians. These people are the ones that are more likely to cannot protect themselves in a war prisons, an open air prisons. And how these vulnerable population are even more prone to crime even in their own homeland region that is happening right now. So these people are even having some limitation in their own human rights. So what is right for us is to give them their rights in a part of evacuation in a form of humanitarian. So this is a part of our opening constitution that we as an independence from the declaration that we also admittedly support the reason for our nation to support every part of every part of international relation treaty. So in this case, how this be likely be done in the real case scenario where we will offer this humanitarian line for the rescuing of these people in a temporary safe environment, and we knew this will be likely be also supported by other humanitarian supporters such as UN or such as the UN or other organization. That's concluding that how this temporary humanitarian plan is exactly what we can to achieve in Indonesia if the opposition were to argue that this will likely take so much of our resources. No, as this will also be supported by other terms of supporters in humanitarian act. In this case, we will also say that the meanings of temporary measurement in this case will be regarding that this policy will mean for the evacuated civilians to exit humanitarian land after a peace treaty has been conducted, and for those people to can actually be imposed back to their homeland. Again, in this scenario, we will also be conducting how the opposition will most likely cater this case to be similar in Rohingya cases, where the cases of evacuation that have been done in Indonesia have a bit of dilemma, where people will give this a bit of help, but even the Indonesian supporter will likely to not support that. But in this scenario, here's how that we argue why this will likely to not happen in cases of civilian Gaza. As we, of course, the Indonesian nation, we need to realize that most of our population supports every help to help our Islamic country group, and this wouldn't be likely to happen in the case of civilian Gaza. So in the second part of that, it will also be less likely to happen for these Gaza civilians to leave our humanitarian land and not to stay although they do give the evacuation and humanitarian aid, but we say that, and we argue that people from strong nationality identity like Arabian nation like Gaza and Palestinian, how it will likely for them to even after they have their aid in a civilized country, they will still be going back to their homeland after the peace treaty is being imposed. So in this will likely scenario, how in this motion that first the opposition needs to explain how the coexisting of this plan will not overcome the morality or even the benefits, as we even itself, the Indonesia, will not have any burdens, considering how all of this will likely be supported in all of cases of region by this humanitarian support. And thus, this world has long been silent for too long. It is our time for us to even give an actual support that we have long been promising since the start of declaration, where we itself said in our opening of constitution or independence of democracy, and even in our own political international relation treaty that we support we do not support in any case outside. Thus, we give all help that we can give to everyone who are in need. So in this motion, that we would like to think how again the opposition will have to explain why this evacuation plan can cause harm, and how the harm itself can overcome the benefit, in which these benefits can also be in a way that after giving this international relation treaty on helping evacuation plan, how we will also be given a side of aided by ourselves by the humanitarian aid from the UN. In cases of this happening, like other countries who have helped other countries, they will give export or imports export or import discount in some way that they are helped in their economical region. And for them the opposition would like to also question how the harm will overcome the benefits and the morality behind it. And I think that's all from me. Thank you.
The Prime Minister spent 7 minutes and 2 seconds giving his speech.
Okay, thank you for the Prime Minister. Let's open the debate from the opposite side of the House. We would like to invite the leader of opposition, Adinda. Yeah, before we start this debate, I'd like to remind that if you wish to have a POI, I think we suggest you to engage more on if you on POI. I think that's clear, very much clear. You can ask POI to clarify something and also to make this debate more fun. Thank you.
Can I have a timer?
Timer on.
Okay, good afternoon everyone. My name is Linda. I will be the leader of opposition, and to clarify everything, whatever I say in this does not reflect my view on whatever the issue is going on, so just a trigger warning for everyone. And I will start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Let us see as to what the Gaza people would actually want, ladies and gentlemen. Shelter, food, medicine, anything, any sort of help, but not by moving them, but by making it more accessible to them, by making it within their reach. Not taking them away from their family, not taking them away from their homeland that they are fighting for, but by making those help more and much more accessible for them, much more within their reach, so they can access it whenever they need it. I So first of all, to engage what the Prime Minister has been saying, I think the Prime Minister is very optimistic about Indonesia's economy. Let us take a look at how we are a developing country. We are still most of the time under reach. We still have people that we need to take care of, and we have seen that some of those people have not been properly taken care of under the status quo that we are living in right now. So by taking in more people that we cannot possibly take care of, by taking people outside of our responsibilities most of the time, we are bringing more trouble into the Indonesian citizens, into the Indonesian government, and we are just bringing extra gains for us with nothing more to lose. So we are saying that we are taking in more people, but we are not getting anything back. We are not, while they say that there are supports, but we think that independently, Indonesia is not getting anything back. Like the imports are still not happening. The exports are still lessening, and we see it that Indonesia's economy is still very underwhelming in order to take in more refugees, especially somewhat around 1,000 civilians from those, and they say that. It's gonna take over resources, and it's gonna take over resources as they have mentioned. But we see this as that it's still gonna take up our resources, even if they say that it's not gonna take up a lot of resources. What are they gonna be using? Our lands. They're gonna be opening up temporary shelters. They're gonna be using our lands, the places that people are currently living in, and most importantly, what we already have and that we might not gain back. And secondly, they also mentioned that we're going to be supported by resources in the humanitarian aid, but we see that it's still using our main resources, our land that we probably do not have. They're going to be opening up forests and to make shelter, whether it be temporary or not, and even worse if it's temporary. And even if they're already getting humanitarian help, we see that this is mainly Prabowo's plan, our president's plan. So it's going to be using our money as a taxpayer, and it's going to have a hold into Indonesia's economy. Indonesia's economy. They also pinpointed that it is temporary, so that they will have to be returned to the war-torn areas at the end of the day. And if the war doesn't end, until when are they going to stay in Indonesia? Until when are they going to be separated from their families? Until when are they going to be separated from their loved ones back at their homeland? So we see that this is not the incentive that the people of Gaza would want. They would want those supports to be given to them, and that is the mechanism that we are offering to you as the opposition side of the house. We believe that it is better to send humanitarian help to them and aid them by giving it to them rather than bringing them over to Indonesia. No, thank you. And so we see that in this status quo right now, the people of Gaza are living under constant siege. And although it is seen as a method they are giving us a method to take them away, we think it is better to keep them under two reasons. One of them is regarding to Indonesia's economy, and the second of all will be why we think that it is better to keep them over to their place rather than keep them to us. First of all, Indonesia's economy. Right now we are basically struggling. Prices are high on everything, overpopulation is an issue, and low economic power, we can barely take care of our citizens, never mind the others I have mentioned in my rebuttal earlier. No, thank you. And then you can see that this whole process, the whole plan is going to take up resources. As I have said, land, money, food, any sort of medicine and help in the medical fields that we can be giving. It's going to be given to them instead of those who are actually in need. If we bring them in, we now have two stakeholders, vulnerable stakeholders that we have to think of. Our people and their people. Do we have the money to take care of the both of them? No. We cannot take care of our own citizens right now, and we cannot take care of another one that is not within our reach either. And they say they might propose to open up living spaces, and they might cut forests. It is bad in the long run. It is also bad for the citizens of Indonesia to begin with, because we are already experiencing recession. We're already experiencing efficiency budget cuts, where budget cuts are already relevant, and this will be all the more reason for us to keep them in their nation, other than to support our economy, also to keep our economy to stay stable. Yes.
Yeah, economic context is mentioned on either side of the house. Your humanitarian hate becomes marginal, therefore delta doesn't exist.
So you're saying, so by that we say that it will still exist no matter what at the end of the day. Nothing, I haven't responded. We still think that the economic issues also exist on our side of the house for the reasons that we still have people that we need to take care of. We still have vulnerables that we need to take care of, and so the economic issues. And if we are not getting anything back by doing our national businesses, we are not going to be gaining the money, the fundings that we need to have them. We're not gonna be getting the help that they are gonna be. We're not gonna be able to give them the help that they are needed, even if they come to our country in the first place. Second of all, why we justify that this will bring no good to the people and the vulnerable actors? First of all, well, I will bring 3 points into this. No, thank you. They will lose their homes, the homeland that they are fighting for. What do the people of Gaza really want? They want their freedom, not for them to be able, not for them to be able to be moved away for some lands to some land. That is why they rejected the idea of America buying their land, because they want to stay in that land. They want to stay there, and they want to keep on going with the land that they love, that they were born in, they were raised in. So we see that they would be more resistant into the idea of being brought away from where they initially belonged. Second of all, they will be moved away from their family, and we think that this is not what they would want. We think that rather than going to another country, it is better to give them shelter on the area and provide them with the help, as we have mentioned in our mechanism. And even if they say that the people, even if they say that they will be given even if they say that those will be given humanitarian help in the end, and how are we going to help them if not using taxpayers' money? Let us see in this current status quo. Donations are mostly done by people who want to give them, who want to charity, and people who have a lot to spare. It is not by using people who do not have. It is not by using the money coming from the people who do not have those economical capabilities. So we take it that the donations differ in the way of donations differ than helping the president form his plans on taking people away from their homeland. And third of all, one of the reasons why Gaza and the people of Palestine still exist in this day and age is the high birth rate. If we separate the men and the women, one, there will be no reproduction, no more births, and the number of people will slowly dwindle down. And so it'll make an incentive for the stronger parties to feel that it is easier to take them out of their land. It is easier for them to be pushed out, and it brings more incentive for us to not take them away from their land. And so that is why we are proud to oppose. Thank you.
The leader of opposition spent 7 minutes and 13 seconds giving her speech.
Okay, thank you for the leader of opposition. To continue the case of the opening government, I would like to invite Deputy Prime Minister Muhammad Daffa. Thank you.
I'll start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Ladies and gentlemen, what I have in my hand right now is a rock that I got when I went to Europe, to Auschwitz. Auschwitz, much like Gaza, is somewhere that have no hope, no sense of places where people are going to live, and so on and so forth. We already know that Gaza itself is an open air prison. No food, no water, no electricity, no communication, and there are so many blockades, and overall there are something that is far different than what we have in Indonesia, and that is Israeli bombing the places to the ground. So, ladies and gentlemen, after we know what Gaza is like, a place where there is no kinds of substantial production happening in that place, and then there are bombings falling from the sky, why then, in their side of the view, they're going to give aid to a place where there are bombs falling from the skies? Meanwhile, in our country, there are no bombs falling from the sky, there will be no disruption to the aid, and it will be going on and going straight to the people that are in need of those help. So, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to firstly state the goals of our side. Firstly, our goal is to limit that, have stronger foreign standing for Indonesia, and also support activism of the Palestinians themselves. How will we achieve this, ladies and gentlemen? Firstly, by limiting that. Why do we want to limit that? That's a very open place question. So firstly, we need to know that in Gaza there are several people that are very vulnerable. There are the children, there are the women, there are the wounded soldiers, there are the wounded non-soldiers, and so much so forth that need immediate medical help. They need food, they need water, and so on and so forth. So, what's the problem? What is stopping us from going into Gaza and giving that help? Ladies and gentlemen, right now, we have something called a blockade. Israel is blockading Gaza from every place of every border crossing. And Gaza right now have 2 border crossings, one to Israel and one to Egypt. And let's see what's happening in Egypt. Oh yeah, the Rafah border crossing is closed. Nothing can go in, nothing can go outside. Why is that closed? There's a treaty stipulation between Israel and Egypt after 1967 that states that border crossing will not be open. There are several walls that are put between Gaza and Egypt. Nothing goes in, and even if there's something that's going to go in, where does that come in from? Israel. It all comes from Israel. Every support that you want to give, every charity, everything, every AGO and NGO, all they have to do is go through Israel first, and then they can finally give aid to the Gaza people. So why do you think that it's a good idea to support them in Gaza when even everything that we want to support have to go through checks from Israel itself? It's impossible, because we already know that the Israeli people, Israeli nation right now is very much intended on disrupting as much people in Gaza so that they will surrender and so on and so forth. That's why we need to limit their debt, and that any kinds of aid going into Gaza will not work, because for the past 50 years, 60 years, it has not stopped anything at all, ladies and gentlemen. Those children are still dying, and those children will be radicalized further and further. And going back towards those children, those women, and those people, these are still people, ladies and gentlemen. They have the same future as us, as you and me. They still have the same hope for a better living condition, and they don't have that luxury to go outside of any country because they are blockaded. And that's why there's a need for these people to get evacuated out of Gaza. And also, moving on to the next thing that we want to achieve, and that is a stronger foreign policy station for Indonesia. We already know why there are no one that is accepting Gaza refugee, because firstly, the Arab states are apathetic. Why are they apathetic? Because they are afraid of Israel and so on and so on, because they are literally in the Middle East. They are literally neighboring countries to Israel. They can get strike and so on and so forth. But Indonesia, for example, they're in Southeast Asia. They're so far away from the main political places. And also Arab states are apathetic because they are also treaty imposed by their losses in wars in 1967. A second thing that happened is that there are now massive humanitarian causes from the UN to give out as much help as possible towards the people in Gaza, because the UN, the US, and even Gulf states such as UAE, Qatar, and Bahrain have been pushing on right now for the peace treaty to happen between Israel and Hamas, for example. We already see in the news so many news sites about Trump giving Netanyahu, going away from Netanyahu, and also meeting with many Arab nations, like what is happening in the trip right now as we speak. And also that gives a reason, much more reason for Indonesia to propose this solution towards the evacuation, because now by having Indonesia giving out the solution of giving the evacuation towards people in Gaza, it gives a strong bargaining point for Indonesia in the world stage. The US, most of all, really want this to stop, because Trump, especially, we already know that Trump really wants victory points and so on and so forth, to be called like a peacemaker. And the US will indeed fund Indonesia for all of its trouble of giving Gazan citizens in. Why is that the case, ladies and gentlemen? Because we see right now in the UN, there are many ways that we can leverage this evacuation towards the world stage, such as the US. We can leverage this. Hey, I give you this luxury of having these people that are getting bombed and everything to eat inside of our country. But please help us too with our export and imports. Extend us from the reciprocal tariff that you have given to so many other countries. That is a leverage that Indonesia can finally give, because we are finally rescuing people from something like the second Holocaust. And that is also something leverage that we can give to the UN, because in the UN has been begging for any country to give a place for Gaza citizens to be held to be evacuated to. And that's why in a foreign policy stance, even Indonesia is going to be benefiting economically, because we're going to get less reciprocal tariffs and more economic aid from the UN, or even from the Gulf states that have been giving a lot of aid recently. And also to my next step is that activism. So why is activism actually something that's important right now? Because activism abroad, we already know that Israel is a place there are no communication, no electricity. So how are we going to have the people that are the victims that are getting bombed to show the world that there is something that is happening right now in Gaza? By having those people be evacuated to a place in Indonesia where there are internet, there are people that they are not getting bomb dropped when they are given journalistic, when they are getting interviewed, they can finally get their voices out. The victims of Israel can finally tell their stories without blockade from Israel. Right now, there can finally be victim testimonies getting handed over to the world, because as of right now, The news site is very blocked by Israel right now. No chance of information going out. And that's why, ladies and gentlemen, from those 3 points, limiting that towards people that are very vulnerable, and there's no hope for them to defend themselves, and also for the foreign policy stance of Indonesia getting massive economic aid because of the UN begging for this thing to happen, and also the UN and also Gulf states that are very rich and already in the steps of pushing Israel to forgiving the Gazan citizens some aid, and also from humanitarian wise. I think that's it. Thank you.
The Deputy Prime Minister spent 7 minutes and 24 seconds giving his speech.
Okay, thank you for the speech from Deputy Prime Minister. To extend the case from the opening opposition, I would like to invite Deputy Leader of Opposition, Ms. Tasya.
Okay, before I start my speech, I would like to do like a trigger warning that anything inside my speech is just for the matter of space and does not represent my moral compass and etc. My quiet preference is just that you can just stand up, and I'll start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Panels, I think the debate has been very dismissive towards the government team, towards the government team. So, and I will explain to you why. First of all, they keep talking about how will the UN PBB will help Indonesia to evacuate, but they don't talk about the mechanism. They don't talk about the actors inside of the organizational status itself. Now, I will explain to you why. Why there will be least likely a support coming from this UN PBB and etc. Because this organizational treaty will run by the US people, and I will explain to you why US will most likely to stand and help Indonesia to help Israel, because US and Israel itself, they are very beneficial in terms of economy and public economy relation, right? Like they trade, like Israel will give their weapons to the US, and we know how weapon is really prioritized and important as to the US itself as a developed country, right? Hence, this is why US will not listen. No, thank you. And this is why US will least likely to listen to will least likely to help Indonesia to actually evacuate this kind of people, because they are scared that Israel will stop by giving the weapon and etc. Because this will harmful for the US itself. Secondly, we know that the reason why PBB, even until now, haven't really give any serious warnings to Israel, because many of the actors in PBB itself is the generation of Israel itself. They actually have the idea. The actors that running the PBB itself is mostly the Israel people. Hence, this is one of the reasoning that even though in the best case that PBB would give like money or like any resources to help Indonesia to evacuate this kind of people, we say that even if this happens, this will happen very rarely, and this will not happen in a massive kind of things, and this will not happen again and again. Hence, we say that at the end of the day, this kind of help from US, UN, PBB, and etc., this will be least likely to happen, right? Even if they also talks about the constitution itself told us to save for humanity, blah blah blah. But we say that in our side of the house, with the status quo right now, the economy is suffering. There are still people who don't get food. There are still homeless people. There are still homeless child. Blah blah blah. We say that the prioritizing for Indonesia itself, as the constitution, is to give prosperity for the Indonesians citizen itself. Hence, the Indonesian should make sure first that all the citizens, that all the structural property are already tackled. Hence, that you can actually help to evacuate the people from the Israel. Next, no, thank you. Next, they actually talk about the blockade happens, but they don't actually engage to you the harms on the process on how will the blockade happens, how this 100 people will not be harmed, will not be killed from the process when they want to evacuate this kind of people from Israel to Gaza. Because in our side of the house, I will explain to you why they are still, this is the case, right? They will do this most likely in like a mechanism. 1 week they will transfer 50 people. Second week they will transfer 50 people. But in the process itself, first of all, I'm sure there will be a warning. Maybe like economic warning. Maybe US will give like a tariff from Indonesia or stop import, blah blah blah. That will actually affect to our economy. Maybe this will make our PPN goes higher. Maybe this will make our international diplomacy gets destroyed, blah blah blah. But secondly, what is the actual harm? Many victims, many vulnerable actors, children, women will be killed throughout throughout this process, because we know Israel already done genocide. Imagine how many, and then how they will most likely to just kill off all these people during the blockade itself,
PY.
because this is already happening, right? Hence, we say that the process of making these people, hence we say that even if you want to help these people, we say that this is least likely unrealistic, because the blockade itself and Indonesia does not have the strong security to actually fight within the process to evacuate. Hence, we say that it's better to actually give an accessible help throughout Gaza, because it's actually would be okay, because we say that in terms of killing in the process itself, we say that this is least likely to happen, because the transformation itself, it will be a supply and not just a human you want to transform, right?
PY.
No, thank you. Okay, jumping on to my first argument, there will be a social conflict that will happen in Indonesia. We know that Indonesia itself is a developing country, economy is struggling, and we are on the status quo that there is overpopulation happening, right? And structural poverty is still exists. Many people are homeless, and many people does not get a decent job. Imagine how mad people will be if they actually send 1,000 of Gaza people into Indonesia. Meanwhile, the problems in East Indonesia itself is still everywhere, right? We know how the conflict happens when the Rohingya people is getting to Indonesia, and how people in Indonesia actually attack them, violent them, no thank you, and actually make them suffer. We said that this is what will happen, even if you want to give them a home, shelter, but what you will make them is unhappy, suffering, and etc. Meanwhile, in our side, we can still make them in Gaza, but we say that even if they say that the Gaza is still a deadlocked country, we say that this kind of people in Gaza will eventually move to other, will eventually be nomaded, and will find any places that are still in Palestine to find the most safe place. Hence we say that even if they are suffering, in our side of the house, we will still keep sending helps, food, and etc. Meanwhile, they still can live on their land and not letting Israel to take away their land, because we know that Israel itself want to claim the land. Hence, actually taking away these women, children from their beloved family will not just make them unhappy, but will actually make them suffer, because they are not accepted by Indonesia's citizen itself, right? Second, the accountability is bad. We already know in the context of the government right now, there are so many campaigns, there are so many promises that happen, 1,000 sekolah kedokteran is already happening. It's already the president already talks about that, but as we see right now, what is happening right now is that Danantara PPN is getting higher, efficiency is everywhere, and this is the problem that the opposition needs to talk. How our accountability of these promises that made by the government will actually be released and actually be implemented throughout until the end of the process of evacuation, and that's why I think we are proposing.
The deputy leader of opposition spent 7 minutes and 14 seconds to give her speech.
Okay, thank you for the deputy leader of opposition. To extend this debate from the government bench, I would like to invite member of government Muhammad Nail. Thank you very much.
Our priorities all for conflict creation as you are that's open. As far as the purpose of them, I'll start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Two responses towards opening opposition. One, economy. I think context of economy is quite symmetric, because we assume that Indonesia does not have any money. That means that the degree of humanitarian that we will give is quite small anyway. So I don't think that's an issue. But second, I think economically, the humanitarian channels, and I think opening government has already tackled this. The reason why humanitarian aid is unlikely to be successful because the channels are literally blocked. Second response on your repercussions. First on tariffs. I think this is very unlikely. I think the U.S. has is already walking on a thin line on the issue of tariffs. A lot of countries are now trading much more with China because of that. I would argue that if you do tariffs as a repercussion for supporting the evacuation, is likely that the US will push more people into China's hands. I would argue that's a political suicide and economic suicide for Trump right now. Second, civilians die in the process. One, it is symmetric. If you don't evacuate them, they die anyway. But second, this is literally not true because the international repercussions of literally killing people who's trying to escape you is too high for Israel or even the US to bear. Couple of extensions. First, on why you get more human development on the long term, directly extending OG, and second, on why you actually get international support more when you evacuate them. First, on the human development on CG, to mechanization. Note this is a disaster of emotions, so we have the right to kind of mechanize how the process of supporting or expanding the process will look like. To mechanization. One, it is likely that the international support and legitimacy for this plan within the international forums, like or through bilateral communication is very high. And this likely success because there are huge political quid pro quo for that. This is what China and Russia, who have very incentive to gain soft power and improving their image and expand hegemony in the Middle East against the US. Second, this is also the West in some countries like France and the UK, because we're currently seeing a rise in left-wing voters being able to vote in progressive governments who, even if they're not necessarily pro-Palestinians, they're not necessarily pro-Israel as well. It is likely that we also garner more resources for this because we flip the economic argument of arming opposition. One, it is likely that this is not a singular actor policy. I think just like most refugees programs, oftentimes it is multi-actor, it is multilateral. You have multiple organizations, multiple countries contributing to the program, and I think this is the case for Syrian refugees and Iraqi refugees as well. So you get to shift the entire support structure of formal institutions within the state. And I think this is directly flipping the arguments of opening opposition. Because this is how you get more long-term development. Because if we are able to prove to you that you get more resources and those resources are likely to be more effective, exactly because of the organization. This was like, for example, you are able to build more scholarships for this for the students. They are more likely to learn things like diplomacy, medicine, and engineering. The reason why this is important is because if we assume that if you take 100 children away from Gaza and upskill them into the point, insofar that they can contribute back to the rebuilding process of society within Gaza, I would argue that this mechanizes the entire case of opening a government. But second, I think they are more likely to be diplomatic icons. Because I think right now, the reason why a lot of countries or just people in general does not support Palestinians, because they are seen as terrorists, they are seen as potential terrorists and savages. I think on our side of the house, they are more likely to be educated, and I think this is likely the case, right? In Unhas, for example, we have a lot of Palestinian students who are currently studying Palestine and going back to Gaza. We know that you expand this process and able to flip the entire narrative of Palestinians. I think this also changes the entire narrative around what is Palestinians and how and who they really are. I would argue you humanize the entire society of Palestinians through this process. Therefore, you gain more international support that way as well. I think this is the long-term human development that we argue on our side of the house, directly expanding OG and also flipping OO. Second extension. I think I want to flip the intuitive argument on Palestinian independence. And I think for 4 reasons why this is actually an argument for CG. One, I think regardless of civilians, Israel will still continue to invade because there's not much formal consequences because of the backing of the United States. So I think the intent to invade is quite symmetric. Therefore, I think the delta, at least on our side of the house, if we assume that Israel will invade regardless of whether you evacuate, I would argue that the casualties is much smaller, and I think that's an important delta. But second, I would argue that the Palestinian land grab is enough international illegitimacy for Israel to invade. It's likely that you still have some sort of backing of China to maximize this international narrative. Because here's the thing, even in Papua, for example, you have a lot of youth, for example, who goes to the Netherlands and study there. But you don't necessarily see the argument of Papua should not go to the Netherlands to do all of those things, because there is still a lot of narrative as to why it is unconstitutional or it is just illegal in international law for what Israel is currently doing, because it's a land grab essentially. But thirdly, I would argue that for the military strategies for Palestinians on the ground, it's likely to be much more productive without much civilians on the ground. You have more room to conduct guerrilla warfare, more flexibility, and more motivation. It's likely that Palestinian soldiers are much more productive because they are no longer afraid of what they're doing are going to backlash to their wives or their children on the ground. Because if they are afraid of the backlash Israel might do, it's likely that they're not going to go into Hamas, for example, they're not going to be much more productive. So I would argue that if we assume that the Palestinian argument that opening option wants to bring, that we want to fight for the independence through the conflict, I would argue is much more productive in CG. Fourth, I think we flip the entire narrative of Israel's human shield argument in our side of the house. I think there's even less international legitimacy for Israel to use saying that all Palestinians are savages and wants to Hamas through human shield argument. The reason why this is likely to happen is that you choke the very legitimacy that Israel has. So you're more likely to shift all of the support from neutral countries to be much more Palestinian leaning. What's the impact? We flip opening opposition's argument on the UN being not wanting to support Palestinians. I would argue that you shift the entire consensus of Palestinian and Israel conflict within the organizations themselves. What's the impact here? I think we flip I think on Egypt, on the long term, every sort of counterfactual that they want to push, like pushing for Palestinian support in international forums through diplomacy or whatever, not necessarily to evacuation. I would argue that the prerequisite of that is improving the narrative or improving the image of Palestinians first, or just shifting the structure first. That is done through exactly our organizations. So every counterfactual that CEO will bring later, prerequisite of that is CG's case. So why do we win this game? For two reasons. I think we are able to expand OG's impact much more crystallized in ourselves. Thus, in the long term, we neutralize and we flip OO. Also, every CO extension needs to be credited into CG first. For all these reasons, proud to propose.
Member of Government spent 7 minutes and 14 seconds during the speech.
Okay, thank you for the member of government. To accept the debate from the opposition bench, I would like to invite the member of opposition, Muhammad Fathir, to be here.
Before I do my speech, please remind that all the words that come from my mouth only for this debate, and it doesn't represent all the idea of mine in real life. And secondly, okay, no, secondly, thank you. Okay, I will start my speech. I will start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, actually the honorable judges. So we gather here to debate about the this house would support Prabowo's plan to evacuate civilians from Gaza. Okay, so as the governing government, from the opening government, they want to evacuate evacuating the people from Gaza to Indonesia to help them. So we, as the governing government, we want to, instead of evacuating, we want to send help or advocate more to the people, to PBB or UN. That's the bold part, or the attack. The attack could be stopped. It could be stopped by the Israeli. So, as an example, there was time that the attack stopped for several weeks, and it worked. You just need to advocate more, so it can be heard. Therefore, I think government plans would be not as effective as the causing opposition. So that's why I think the way we advocate is more effective than send them to Indonesia. Okay, let me jump to my first thing first. First thing first, let me jump to my rebuttal for the opposition for the government. So the first one, they say that how can you make sure that your humanitarian aid, food, and something like this, such and so forth, can not be blockaded by the Israeli, because Israeli actually blockaded all the things that what we want to send to the Israeli to the Palestinian, especially Gaza. Okay, so how can you sure that also yours is not blockaded by the Israeli itself? So that's why no answer. So, and the second one is that So the second one is that the Gazan government said that it gains more international support. So that's what makes the displacement of Palestinians, especially Gaza, getting faster and faster. So okay, and let me jump into my first argument. Just let me jump from my
UI.
first argument. So bringing Gaza civilians to Indonesia only make the Palestinians seem weak, especially for the Gaza itself. So they want to protect their homeland. Their people want to stay and want to protect their homeland because that's theirs. We have to make highlight that that's theirs. That's theirs. And why we want to evacuate them to the other places? In this case, Indonesia. I think it's not effective. It's not an effective plan to be done by the government itself. Okay, and the second one is that. Okay, the second one is that if we evacuated the people from Gaza, Indonesia will be seen as a destination for refugees from the other world from the other world. No, years ago, maybe 1 year or 2 years ago, yes, like I was saying before, like the Rohingya people, we refused the Rohingya refugees. Yet the government wants to bring this idea again, which is evacuating Gaza civilians. Indonesia will be seen as a destination for refugees. So we don't want our country to be seen as a refugees destination. So maybe people like just send them to Indonesia, just send them to Indonesia, just send them to Indonesia. So it will make many refugees come to Indonesia again and again. So
Okay, why?
so okay, and again and again. Okay. And so let me jump to my third. So why worsen Indonesian image? So evacuating means support Israel's plan to displace or take the people to be able to take away their land. How? Because because we take them from their land and we send them to Indonesia. So yeah, it makes the plan it makes the plan by Israel to displace the place is getting faster and faster. And the second one, Indonesia will be seen Indonesia seen as making relation to Israel. Yeah. So the third one is that Israel could even be more massive to harm Palestinians because thinking that Indo can accept Palestinians. Palestinians. So, it's Palestinians. So at the end of the day, why this? At the end of the day, why is this? The government plan is not. Why this government plan is not effective rather than the causing opposition way? Is that because we actually want to advocate their voice to the PBB or UN so they can get more help, So that's why we state 3 points. Is that bringing Gaza to Indonesia only make the Palestinian seems weak, and it could make the image of Indonesia could be worsened, and also make Indonesia as a destination for refugees. And I think that's from my speech, and I probably took.
The member of opposition spent 5 minutes and 31 seconds to finish his speech.
Okay, thank you for the member of opposition. To close the debate from the government bench, I would like to invite the government lead, Zahra.
The reason why lots of Palestinians are using Instagram to wake the empathy of people to donate and help them evacuate outside of Gaza is because they want to give better life for their children. What does this tell you? All the characterization of like the Gaza people is actually been tackled, has actually been clear from the start, right? That say that we are taking away these people from their families are very wrong panels, because exactly of this engagement that they want to gain from Instagram, for example, it means that it's within their interest to actually evacuate outside of Gaza, right? It's meaning that it's within actually their interest to give better life for their children. So I don't understand all the concerns and harms that has been mentioned from opening opposition until closing opposition, that is talking about how these people don't want to get away from Gaza is actually not existent, right? So understand this is actually within the interest, and we are supporting the interest of them to having better future to for them to also fulfill the interest of paying back to all people if they become doctors, for example, if they become engineers, diplomats, and all of that, right? Therefore, before I move to my clash, I like to give one independent rebuttal to CO case that talks about they want to advocate the one thing that they want to advocate is by sending aids. Panels, I think that these premises are very symmetric on both sides, right? Not everyone receives aids on your side, and we only evacuate 1,000 people on our side, not the whole population of Gaza. What does this tell you then? What is the comparative? I think that it will break down the whole data that exists from the opening teams before, right? Firstly, which sides actually gives the biggest magnitude, and secondly, which gives longer impact, right? Firstly, when you only keep sending aids, for example, that can only feed like 1,000 people, but not only the whole 2 million population of Gaza, for example, meaning that the whole food that you give, meaning that the other the rest of like 1 million people will actually die of starvation at the end of the day, right? There is no progress on your side. People are only living in that dry land. But under our side, even though we only evacuate 1,000 people, we actually gives you the realistic impact, where our process of evacuating, for example, we are making 10 doctors because they study in UI or Unhas, for example, that can later help 100 people in Gaza later in the future, right? This is something that actually only exists and only exclusive on CG panels. That is why this is something that you should only credit on our side, right? Moving to my clash then on whether or not this plan is giving some significant help to Gaza. Let's see what happened on the opening teams, right? They keep talking about safe environment versus giving humanitarian aids. There are two ways on this. Firstly, I think the safe environment that OG brings easily tackled by OO because they think this is a zero-sum game. Note these panels, the evacuation that happens does not mean aids are stopped at the end of the day, right? It still exists under our side. There's still so many beggings for Gaza that's coming from China, for example, because they are actually like violating the because Netanyahu is actually violating the international law, right? Meaning that there are also many countries that keep sending aids to Gaza, but on the other hand, we are also evacuating 1,000 people from Gaza, meaning that aids will still exist under our side, right? What are actually the goal under our side there? Firstly, evacuation, meaning that preparation that will give that impact to the future of young generations in Gaza. But secondly, to also give easier access for them to have their own doctors, for example, for people that supports them outside of Palestine, for having their own diplomats that are made by going to Unhas, for example, meaning that the help that exists is actually from external cases, but still gives much bigger impacts, because when you're only fighting inside, for example, and you don't get any help directly from outside, it's something that is very hard to fight against, like the intervention of Israel, right? What are the process under our side then? I think that the prerequisite of OG case exists on us panels, right? Understand, we explain the process of evacuation, the process of programs where they are evacuated here, meaning that they will go to so many universities who will give them a full right scholarship and full right scholarship until they work, for example, and until they can go back to Gaza, right? But secondly, let's talk about their concern, talking about the conflicts from evacuation and how Indonesia will and how some people will not accept this refugee. Panels, the problem of stigma around refugee is not because of the refugee itself, but because of their unproductivity, right? Rohingya people that not get accepted here because they don't go to school, because they don't go to work, even if we provide them shelters, even if we provide them lunch, right? This is why the stigma around refugee exists. But under our side, we make sure our evacuation program that they enter university where they have full scholarship, where they will will become doctors, engineers, and diplomats, right? Why is this likely to happen? Because understand the characteristic of Gaza civilians, panels. Firstly, they fight until their last breath, right? Meaning that they will use this privilege and opportunities as much as possible because it's within their blood to begin with, because it's within their blood to not waste anything that they got, right? Because that's why Palestinian people are still exist until this day. That's why they haven't got extinct, because these people are wanting to fight until their final last breath, right? But secondly, because they are willing to leave their land for better future, so they can pay back to all the sacrifices that comes from their ancestors that have been fighting like for 80 years fighting against Israel, right? But secondly, let's see on closing theme, for example. I think that CO also bring the case of like how they want to advocate to UN to advocate to UN to ask for peace, right? To ceasefire Gaza as fast as possible. This is not possible, fans. Understand, when it's only the actors that is coming from other countries, it's very hard to do because it's not the direct actor, because it's not the actors that directly feel the impact of like the impact of like the suffering that they got from Israel, right? Meaning that when in the next 10 years, for example, when we can create diplomats, for example, this is how we can create the direct impacts when they can work together with UN and all of that to ask for peace, for example. This is why the long-term impact, even though it will take a long time, this will give so much better magnitude, because this is the realistic goal that we can achieve on compared to all teams in this case, right? Then why are we so much better than OG, and why CG wins this debate, panels? For two major reasons. Firstly, the magnitude of impacts are contingent to whether or not the process of evacuation and education distribution are successful, because we are the only one that provides the mechanism as to why the evacuation most likely to be successful. But secondly, we prove to you the long-term impact and development that can actually exist under CG, right? But secondly, we are the one who tackle down all cases that are coming from opposition. We answer the economy, the refugee conflict, the concerns about them not going back, and all of that, right? Meaning that our mechanism answer all ONCL concerns. Therefore, CG wins this debate. Thank you.
Government will spend 7 minutes and 16 seconds giving us speech.
Thank you for the government whip. So to close the entire debate, I would like to invite the opposition whip, Laura. Here.
Three, two, one. The narrative that Zahra told you that some Palestinians or Gaza, they want to like be reallocated to other countries, and that's why they are looking for funding. We think that there's a shift in the trend of the narrative into like, why not protecting our lands? Why not protecting the Gaza? Why not stay until the end of this war and still so that we can still have our land and not being taken by Israel. These are the narratives that is currently popular, and these are the narratives that keeps the Palestinians to wanting to keep their land on their hand. Few rebuttals. I think that before I move on, I think that the question in this debate that should be answered is that whether it's going to be significant or not. But secondly, then I think that the second question is whether it's going to be in line with the current progressive agenda that we've already created in the current status quo. This is to say that the current agenda that we've successful in doing is, for example, doing ceasefire, for example, and secondly, still maintaining the Gaza people in their own area so that the area won't be taken away by Israel. We think that these are the questions that should be answered in this debate, and we as CO in this debate, I'll explain to you how then this is going to happen. We think that what we bring as CO then in this debate. Firstly, we told you why this harms the progressive agenda, but secondly, that we propose to you why instead of instead of relocating or evacuating the people, which is 1,000 only, which is not going to be significant anyway, firstly. But secondly, we already told you why not in the form of like advocating through like PBB, for example, in which, yeah, we understand it's going to take a long time, but at the very least, we're not supporting the Israel's agenda to like accelerating to displace the Gaza from their own area. Those are the path of victory that CEO wants to propose in this debate. Few responses then towards CG. Firstly, they told you that there's going to be like aid from okay. So their whole idea said that there's going to be like help from other countries in order. Their main idea, they told you that there's going China would example of countries like China would still going to send help or aid to Gaza. This is exactly the reason why evacuating isn't the exclusive method to help the Gaza. Because in the status quo, exactly from the fact that you said that there's still countries who's willing to support Gaza in the very first place, prove that Indonesia doesn't necessarily need to evacuate the people. But secondly, then they also told you that current focus shift from US to China. This is exactly the reason why. Because there's the shift of the powers in China, in which China, we know they're pro to Palestine, it means that there's nothing. It means that the effort of evacuating isn't necessarily needed, because in the end of the day, the power is currently shifting from countries who previously was so powerful, which is the US, now goes to China. It means you don't need that to do that on the very first place. Secondly, they also told you that, oh yeah, we're going to put these children, we're going to put them into school, we're going to put their future diplomat or doctor, whatnot. We think that this is exactly what Israel wants in the very first place. It means that once they become doctor or once they become diplomats, their land probably already gone. There's no Palestine anymore. There's no Gaza anymore in the future. And this is why your statement claiming that other countries with international supports will eventually wants to support you to give you funding in order to evacuate civilians would not going to exist anyway, because of that idea, and how within the international community also understands that, oh, because the current power is currently shifting, so it means it's not necessarily needed to evacuate and to like do such things on the very first place. Okay, now. So yeah, they also said that about like So I think they also said that about like I think that's all from CJ. And yeah, even if under our side of the house, we're going to like take a long time in order to like do such advocate in like PBB, for example. We still think that it's still going to be okay. It's way better because how the current agenda is still going on. But secondly, then how it's still going to benefit Indonesia in the end of the day. And let's compare. Let's respond OG then in this debate. We think that OG comes into this debate by just explaining that, oh yeah, it's going to be really good because it's in line with like what the UN wants. Yeah, it's really good to help because lots of people in Israel is currently in Palestine is currently need help, right? We understand that. So we think that OG in the first place, their main idea in this debate is just they wanted to like support. It's that they just wanted to evacuate because they're going to need help. But I'm going to explain to you why then this is not going to be possible. The first one is that we think that in order for you, exactly, because there's going to be blockade, right? Because there's going to be blockade, it means that several things, prerequisite things should be done by Indonesia. For example, Indonesia must pay like huge amount of money in order to save that Palestinian, in order to take the Palestinians. But secondly, that Indonesia's probably having like problem with the Israel military in the end of the day, right? But secondly, then they also told you about like how this is going to like how this is not going to be in the form of like Rohingya in the end of the day. And this is also what CG told you about like how this is not going to be resulted in Rohingya. We think that the reason why Indonesia isn't wanted to, Indonesians don't want to support the idea of evacuating refugees and putting them inside their own country isn't because they're not productive, but it's because why not on the very first place use that money you gain from other countries into helping the Indonesians very first place instead of helping others. This is the reason why they keeps on like saying no into like helping refugees, because why not prioritizing them on the very first place? Because understand, Indonesia itself, we already suffer a lot, right? We're developing countries, and even if like you're so productive, it proves to you that job itself can now be taken away by refugees, because now they're productive. This shift the trend into like accepting refugee, because probably refugee does not know women, for example, right? So this means there's going to be like competition circulating around the Indonesians, and this is why even if they're productive, it's still going to result into hate, and even more because it proves that how there's going to be competition in the end of the day. Why then this is also correlates with my first speaker idea about like Indonesia as a destination for refugees. Exactly, because if you're evacuating, it means there's going to be like precedent in order to like helping more and more refugees in the end of the day, and this is why it's going to be harmful. And yeah, so to close up this debate, what are part of victory as closing opposition? Firstly, we told you already why then this is going to be harmful for like the progressive agenda that we've already created. But secondly, then we propose to you of other methods, even if it's going to take a long time, it's still okay, and it's still relatively way better. For all of those reasons, proud to oppose.
7 minutes and 18 seconds giving her speech.
Okay, thank you for the speech from the. Okay, because this is grand final, so you can stay on the main hall. We are together. The panels will go outside to decide the winners, and we'll go back to after academic final to announce the result. And after that, we can give you the feedback. Thank you very much for the.
Oke, jadi langsung kita lanjut final KMI.